Okay, going live.
Shared it with you. What's up, legends? I think we are live. Just waiting to see the feed come up. Yep, we are. Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is Thursday morning. Thursday morning, the 10th of the 3rd. That means it's only 9 days until my birthday. Woohoo! And it is a great discussion this morning that we're going to have about how to balance sports and gym. If we haven't met, just in case, my name is Yanni Baumeister. To my left, your right, is Richard the Rig Lilies. We are head coaches of Unity Gym and the Unified Movement System. We turn driven people just like yourself into strong, fit, and flexible athletes. Of course, if you want to work with us, completely complimentary. Try one of our free trainings. You've got to jump over to the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group, and we usually have a couple of legends tuning in from the group live every morning to watch us. Also, if you are on YouTube, I'm going to do this right now. Make sure you hit that little like button. It does help us a lot. And also let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from in the comments, and we'll send you some love. Today's question, today's discussion, today's topic comes from a really good coaching session last week with one of our UMS online coaching legends who participates here. His hobby or passion that he does on the weekends is trapeze. And he has hit a little bit of a hurdle along the way with some shoulder pain that he's working with us and with our resident physio, Phil White. And he sort of asked the question, should I change or alter the program split because I'm doing trapeze on the weekends? And, this creates a really great dialogue on the difference between the micro loading, which is form and technique within your workouts, and macro loading, which is everything else that you do throughout the week. And we've had this same exact sort of issue with people who do a specific profession where they're favoring certain muscles, like for instance a computer programmer who sits in a chair for long periods of time doing sprints where they're arching their back, rounding their shoulders, using their forearms and wrists in a certain way on the keyboard or on the mouse, to builders and laborers who are doing more physical work but favoring certain muscles in the body, and then they come into the gym and you've got to sort of take into consideration what you're doing outside of the gym and how that's going to impact, or how gym is going to impact that. And so we'll run this clip, and it starts with me sort of building some context by reading out the question that our tribe member has asked, and then we'll run through a brief clip of us giving him some feedback, and then we're going to discuss this much deeper. Let's roll that clip, Richie. It's heavy on hanging and question.
Okay.
Reprogramming split. My weekend hobby is flying trapeze and aerial straps. Attached a video for context. It's heavy on hanging and pulling movements. I don't do any pushing after listening to podcast episode 320 about healthy shoulders. I know Rad and Yanni stress the importance of balancing push-pull movements in the same
Yep.
plane. I'm experiencing some shoulder pain, and I'm pretty sure it's because I don't do any vertical pushing and lots of pulling, hanging. What would you recommend for vertical push exercises? I can't do a handstand. How should I adjust programming to better balance my shoulders? I'm on phase 2. For example, Monday has me doing pull-ups and my lats are very sore after weekend. Should I
Yep.
replace that with vertical push movements so I'm not doing any pulling? Yeah, look, what the very first thing to consider with this sort of thing is your forearms. Like, your forearms are going to be getting absolutely hammered, and so that's something that you want to consider for sure. And then so doing that all over the weekend and then coming straight into doing pull-ups on Monday is not going to be ideal. But you definitely need to start doing some more pushing. And the most obvious is your shoulder press variations. Also, make sure that you're doing the external rotation stuff. That's going to be really important too. External rotation, trap three, the rotator cuff and the scapular musculature in isolation is going to help.
Sometimes it's not what you have to do more in your program, but sometimes what you have to do less. So if
Yep.
you're doing a lot of pulling, then you just might need to reduce a little bit of that pulling or find a better recovery strategy for the muscle group. Because if you're hitting your lats every single day and you're not doing much, like there's not a lot of recovery time in between, and you're not getting any like lat releasing techniques done in your shoulders, then yeah, you're going to find that you get a lot of shoulder pain. Look at maybe, yeah, just balancing that up a little bit more pushing vertically, a little bit less on the lats, and maybe looking at getting the lats released as well. Either doing that yourself through foam rolling, using
Massage
those
balls.
massage balls, or seeing a massage therapist to really work on those lats.
I would certainly be reducing the amount of pulling movements that you do, and in the gym, and increasing the amount of pushing movements that you do.
Like we see this a lot in sports. Sports have this great way of overusing one set of muscle and not very good at balancing the other side of the body. And this is, I think, one of those examples, Mark, with your trapeze work. It's just super lat intensive, and that means yeah, you need to be as thorough with your pushing to offset that. Otherwise, yeah, you get these niggles.
Rock and roll. So, you know what? I was just thinking while we were doing that, we should get a little blinking replay icon up in the corner so people know that that's the replay. I always give Richie a lot to think about. So, what we want to really talk about here is there's two things that are very important. One is to understand that you've got a spectrum of load variables that you've got to manage when you're doing physical activity, and they can be very intensive and not very intensive, or seem very intensive and seem not very intensive, but they still have a big impact on your physical body. Some people might think that sitting at their computer desk working for a 6 hour sprint without getting up and stretching or moving around isn't very intensive, but it still has a major impact on your physical body. And likewise, doing what Mark's doing there, the trapeze work on the weekends, very similar to like something like rock climbing as a hobby. Like we get a lot of rock climbers who do it recreationally as a hobby, but they don't take into consideration that when they're rock climbing is when most people who go to the gym recreationally or as a hobby, they're resting in the evenings, or on the weekends. The same thing happened to me when I developed overuse injuries in my forearms. The very first time was when I took up golf as a hobby, recreational golf on the weekends, when I was prior resting and recovering from my gym training. And so immediately you've got to, once we understand that those two things are very important and you have to consider them when you're designing an exercise program, then the next thing is considering the training split and how to best set that up so that you're not interfering. And as our tribe member said, our template training split starts with vertical push pull on Monday. And the reason why we put vertical push pull as day one on Monday is because that's usually when you're the most rested and recovered. And over 2 decades of programming for the same sort of demographic of people, we found that was the weakest point. That was the weak link. Everyone tested poorly in overhead press and chin up. Most people were okay in everything else, or roundabout were okay in everything else, but everyone consistently failed the overhead press testing, including myself, Rad, and Richard. And so we concluded that needed to be prioritized at the start of the week. Whatever gets put at the start of the week in the program sprint usually gets the most amount of attention, because that's usually when we've had nine out of 10 people don't do a lot of physical activity on Sunday. So we could take to the bank that they were going to have been well rested on Monday, and so we need to take into consideration with this individual that we're talking about, Mark, doing trapeze. his lats have just had a huge workout on the weekend. And so putting vertical push pull on the Monday workout is not a good idea, because we know that we need around about 72 hours recovery time before a new bout of stimulus on that same muscle group. And trapeze, when we look at it, although he's doing mostly what we would call an isometric contraction, he's hanging, he's not doing chin ups where he's doing a concentric and then an eccentrically loaded contraction. He's just hanging. It's still a muscle contraction on the lats, the forearms, the biceps, all of those. It's a pulling movement pattern. Whether it looks like he's pulling himself up or not, it's still a pulling movement pattern. And so we have to take that into consideration when we design a program split for Mark. The next is we've got to look at how many days of stimulus he's getting, how many doses of stimulus he's getting in that musculature in comparison to the opposing musculature. Because when we're programming, anatomical structural balance is a priority. We need to make sure that the body's designed very well balanced. And if we stay out of its way and give it a balanced stimulus, it will develop really well. But if we give it an imbalanced stimulus, like Richard says in that clip, sports tends to be imbalanced by nature. It favors certain muscles and neglects others, and that's another term for that is specialization training. When you're a specialist, you favor certain things, certain skills, certain muscle groups, and you neglect others, and you become sometimes good at one thing and bad at others, and that's okay. But then when it favors the musculature too much, you can become imbalanced in the sense of anatomical structural balance. So when we're programming, we need to take that into consideration when we're designing a gym workout, And so for Mark, it's very easy. We got to make sure that he's doing enough pushing to combat or counteract the amount of pulling that he's doing in his hobbies, and by doing that, we're going to ensure that he stays balanced. Now, he has provided us with evidence that he is not getting enough because he's presented with shoulder pain. And that is a classic example of a training split or a practice that is out of balance, that is out of whack. That's the body telling him there's something that's not right here that needs to be addressed. And so with the right tweaking of his program, and it's actually funny that Mark has gone 2 phases into our program without us knowing. Well, he's in his second phase, which means each phase is 4 weeks, without us knowing that he does all this trapeze work on the weekend. And so it highlights that, okay, wow, we need to adjust that training split to accommodate his hobby on the weekends. And that's why it's always really important to look at both the micro loading, where we're constantly looking at the micro loading. We're constantly looking at our tribe's form and technique in the movements that we prescribe. But we also need to know about your macro loading. We need to know what else is going on in your life that could be contributing. Do you play golf on the weekends? Do you play a sport? Do you trapeze on the weekends? Are you a recreational rock climber? All of these things are really, really important. Richie, you got very quickly before we jump over, shout out to Vinnie Brown, Dave Clark, Jody Kumaran, legends in our Movement Mastermind Facebook group who are tuning in and saying hi.
How you going, guys? I got really nothing more to add to that, Yanni. You went on for a good little rant and you covered most of it. I definitely agree with everything that you said. And it's super common that everybody that people get these sort of injuries or issues in their body not knowing why. And I think it's a super important conversation to have and present to you guys because it is so common. And a lot of people get it wrong. A lot of people, again, I feel like try to do too much in 1 week. They try to do this, and then they wonder why they're getting injured. And it's often not what they're, like I was saying, not often what they aren't doing, but something more along the lines of what they're doing too much of. And sports generally, is imbalanced, and it produces a lot of one thing and lacks in a lot of other little things that you need to create a balanced system, a balanced body. And that's the next step is pain, really, that manifests.
Absolutely. And just very quickly, the closing thing I want to leave you guys on is it is very important when we talk about training for balance. We're not just talking about training for balance in the attributes that we're developing, like speed, strength, maximal strength, fitness, flexibility. We're talking about balance in the anatomical structures of the body too, from left to right side symmetry, but also from the outer unit muscles. The pushing muscles versus the pulling muscles, and those outer unit muscles versus the inner unit stabilizers. And if you lose any balance in any of those areas, you're exposed to more joint glide, where the joint becomes unstable. You're exposed to overuse injuries in certain areas, and if it goes for too long, it can even impact your posture and create really quite bad joint dysfunction, which takes quite a long time to correct. So the best answer is to get some help designing a training split that is first and foremost balancing all of those things, but second, considering everything else that you're doing in your life, and is well structured to sort of suit that as well. That's the closing thought from me. Vinny Brown
All
saying
right.
so many programs, so little time. Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow for Friday to bring this week in for a wrap. And yeah, have a great day.
See you tomorrow.